Here's something I think is totally fascinating, actually. And that is, I really do. It's like if you don't get enough sleep, it turns out that a study has shown that your brain kind of gets micro sleep. So if you are sleep deprived, it's not like your brain and central nervous system and the rest of you, your body is just tired. That won't do, it turns out. And so what the brain does is it snatches sleep, micro sleep. You don't even notice it. What you have happen though is your attention wanders. You can't focus. And what's going on during those micro sleeps is absolutely incredible, Catherine, because it involves the cerebrospinal fluid, which it turns out is like the flushing system for the brain during sleep. When you are sleeping at night, your brain is literally flushing itself out using cerebrospinal fluid, which surrounds the brain and the spinal cord. And if you don't do that, your brain will do it. Your central nervous system will do it just in little doses during the day, during which you can't pay attention to stuff. What do you
Yeah,
think?
I think that's so true, and that's awful when you're thinking about it. If you don't sleep, your brain is kinda shutting itself on and off throughout the day in these little micro cycles, and so it's starting to clean up all the stuff in there that it should have been cleaning up overnight, and it's now doing it during the day, so you're just not fully attentive to the things that you wanna do, and perhaps even other people notice you're not 100% there.
Well, and I think that's amazing because first of all, we should do a little bit of a review here. Cerebrospinal fluid, which most people I think have heard of, CSF, it fills the hollow spaces in the brain, the ventricles, and then it also circulates around the spinal cord. And that's why if you're going to get a sample of cerebrospinal fluid, often they'll take it from between the vertebra in your back and they go in and they take a little sample. Okay. Well, during sleep, it turns out one of the reasons we need sleep in terms of restoring one's nervous system is because brain tissue itself shrinks during sleep, during deep sleep. And that allows the cerebrospinal fluid to rush in and out of those ventricles and the area surrounding the brain, almost like you'd say, oh, it's like power washing my brain. Yeah. And if you don't do it and you think you're going to be cute and stay up or not get sleep, then your brain will snatch mini sleeps in order to do this maintenance work. It's almost like if you don't power wash your house, well, it turns out the power washer will turn on for micro minutes a day and do it itself. And the problem with that is you can't pay attention when your brain's being power washed by your cerebrospinal fluid.
So true. And one thing that might help people understand as well, the cerebral spinal fluid is what I used to teach. I used to tell my students, think of your brain in a very simplistic way as a bunch of marbles in a jar, and you pour the water into the jar, and the water fills all those gaps, right, in between the marbles. And sort of that is the cerebral spinal fluid. So that's
That's
quick just a quick tidbit, but this was actually a study that was done at MIT, and it was published in one of the most prominent science journals called Nature Neuroscience. And what they did to find out what's happening with these micro moments of sleep during the day is they were
that's
volunteers, and they put them into scanners, and then they had them do two different types of conditions. One was a normal night of sleep, and the other was an all nighter. And I'm sure we have all done all nighters. And then they monitored all these physiological things like brain waves and heart rate and the size of the people. What else, Dr. Avlo, did they look at? Do
they
you
looked at
recall?
blood oxygen flow, they looked at heart rate, breathing, and the movement. Most importantly, perhaps, they looked at the movement of cerebrospinal fluid. Now, people haven't done this before, to my knowledge, at least not with this and a real window on what's going on. And therefore, it's certainly the first time. And listen, I studied neuroscience, I practiced psychiatry for 25 years. I did not know. that during sleep, your brain cells, your neurons can literally shrink up to 60%. They found at MIT. Why? Well, I don't know if it's the why. It just happens to be that one of the things that's possible when your brain tissue shrinks that way is that the CSF can come in and bathe the area in a sort of flow state
Yeah.
between brain cells and clean things out. This is one reason why if you're constantly sleep deprived, you might be vulnerable to having beta amyloid accumulate, which is linked to dementia, right, in the brain. And so you have this cleaning process that's going on, and the same cleaning process will go on during moments of inattention if you don't get enough sleep. And it's even more than that because other stuff happens during those waking hours when you have these micro sleeps. Other physiological parameters that they measured are things like your pupils contract, they shrink, your attention collapses, you can't pay attention, your breathing will slow, and your heart rate slows. Sounds a lot like sleep, but you don't know it, which is the amazing thing is like your body, your nervous system is reclaiming what it needs, which is one of the reasons, by the way, and I might as well say it, for great sleep, which you can get at 4vitahealth.com, is our supplement for great sleep. You need sleep. If you don't get it, then your body's going to kind of try to take it from you, but in tiny doses. It won't be enough, it- and you won't be able to pay attention. And so you want deep restorative sleep, which is what we say for great sleep will give you. You get it at 4Vita Health. All right, enough about 4vitahealth.com, but still totally fascinating because I'll tell you, when people don't sleep, what do you experience? Well, for me during med school or taking call as a psychiatry resident, I felt after no sleep for a night, very cloudy. I felt like I really couldn't focus, and my head did feel different. It felt sort of heavier, cloudy. And now I have a visual to go with that, which is that the cerebrospinal fluid had not been allowed to do what it normally does when you sleep deeply at night, which is to rush in and wash out, if you will, debris and other things that need to be flushed out of your central nervous system, which is achieved during sleep. So what happens? Your attention will collapse when your nervous system does it on its own during the day, which is not what you want.
No, not at all. Another thing, Dr. Abla, I was thinking about, people may not know this, but there's two different kinds sleep regulators. One is the circadian rhythm, which most people are familiar with. That's the timer in our brain that helps coordinate our sleep with and the day and the night cycle. And that part of the regulator is influenced by light exposure. And that's why we're told to turn off our phones and our TVs and other things before we go to bed. Because if you don't do that, you're not going to tend to feel sleepy at night because you have a lot of light coming in. But the other one is called sleep pressure. And this is really our drive to sleep, right? It's what says you need to be asleep. It's that drive. However, when you stay awake for a long time, you get the need for more and more sleep to build up in your system. That's why you actually feel more and more tired the longer you stay awake. And eventually that sleep drive kicks in. If you're not sleeping for several nights in a row, it will actually kick in and sort of make you sleep, even if it's just for a short amount of time. And this is part of what we cover in our book called The Sleep Switch, which we wrote together, and it can be found at thesleepswitch.com. And it has a lot of information, not just scientific information, although it's scientifically written, but for lay people, it has a lot of tips, and it has you even recorded a nice nighttime meditation that will help you
Yeah,
fall asleep as well.
absolutely. So the sleepswitch.com. And I think that's tremendously important, as is 4greatsleep.com, the supplement, because you can't cheat yourself for very long, or you do get this hunger for sleep. And that means that your brain is screaming at you, like, look, we need a power wash here. There are other things that are going to make things more difficult for you in terms of getting the restorative deep sleep that you need. One is we live in this world where we're constantly exposed to screens. And if you are exposed to blue light, right, your brain sees that as the sun is rising. Blue light comes out of your monitor, comes out of your television, and that can delay melatonin release for 45 to 60 minutes. So that's going to delay the onset of deep sleep as well. And that's tremendously important to know, as well as the fact that if you're stressed at night, and by the way, if you're watching the news and think, oh, I'll just fall asleep watching the news, you're going to be stressed, perhaps, and that's going to raise your cortisol level, which is not good because that increases anxiety. So there's like a negative feedback loop. Plus, you're getting the light that's delaying sleep. And so many people try to do that. Social media has been shown to also independently, and that's blue light coming out of your phone, but to independently cause sleep interruption or sleep delay. And fun fact, the average human or adult human touches his or her phone 2,600 times a day. Like, we're addicted, man. We are addicted to our phones. I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but there's no question that bright light, late night work, and caffeine are going to stand in the way of you getting your brain to do what it wants to do, which is turn off and turn on that internal cleaning system that I had no idea was there. And here I am at 64 years old, having practiced psychiatry for 25 years and studying neuroscience undergrad. And I didn't know that. So I'm very glad to know it now.
You mentioned caffeine. I have a friend who drinks a cup of coffee before going to bed, like literally right before going to bed. I'm like, why are you doing that? You're not going to sleep. This person swears that it doesn't keep him awake. So I don't know. It would keep me wide awake for hours and hours. So I don't know.
I think people develop tolerance. People are different, but listen,
Yeah.
it's also the quality of your sleep. So he may not know, or she may not, whatever, man or woman, what the impact truly is, because there's so much that has to happen or is supposed to happen during sleep. We talked about the brain flushing out, literally, who knew, waste materials. But in addition to that, your emotional circuitry gets reset, rebuild cellular connections. So the brain cells in your brain, of course, are connected by what are called synapses. The nerve cells don't really touch. They communicate across a little fluid-filled gap. And in that gap, they're passing chemicals back and forth in little plastic bags. You could think of it as vesicles that contain neurotransmitters back and forth, back and forth. If you don't get enough sleep, there won't be enough of that connectedness that is required in order to process things, to learn, to feel emotionally balanced, and also to consolidate your memories. So during deep and restorative sleep, your memories are actually etched more deeply, if you will, into your memory banks. If not, you start to lose things. It's almost amazing that there's a physiological correlate, actual evidence that goes along with what people have always known. You forget your keys, you don't do this, you don't do that. And very often someone might say, yeah, I didn't sleep last night. We know this, that you need to sleep. It's going to reset your brain. Now we know that one of the reasons is because you need this fluid being recycled through your central nervous system. But if you're not sleeping well, I would say give For Great Sleep a try, because it has all natural ingredients. It's made in the United States, and we hear great things about it.
Yes, we do. We do get a lot of great feedback about it. This is actually a scary thought, Dr. Abloh. And I learned
Uh-oh.
this initially. Yeah, I learned this initially from my husband when he was becoming a pilot. And so they had somebody come in and talk to them, him and his team, about the importance of sleep. And the instructor mentioned this, that if you're awake for 18 hours, your reaction time equals the blood alcohol level of 0.08. And I believe that's legally impaired. So obviously 18 hours is a long time to go with sleep, but your reaction time still diminishes even after not getting 8 to even 12 hours of sleep, which is a lot.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And so if you don't sleep for 18 hours, that means the most you're going to sleep if you hit the pillow now after 18 hours is 6 hours,
Wow.
which turns out for most people to not be enough. There are some outliers for whom that may be, quote, enough. But really, if you're not getting enough sleep, even though you're allowing yourself the time, which too many people don't, there are some things you can do that will allow you to fix it, right? One is exposing yourself to natural light in the morning. So, what you want to do is reset your circadian rhythms. We're built as humans to sleep at night, wake in the morning. However, we have so much light at night from screens, and some people, they don't get out much maybe in the morning, or they're sleeping in, or they're right on their phone again. That the blue light is not all you need. You need natural sunlight. If you were to step outside for 10 minutes in the morning, you'd be doing yourself a world of good. There's no question about it. And of course, less stimulation in the evening, because there's a kind of tail to that stimulation. You can't turn off your brain and your central nervous system like you turn off a light switch. So many people think, oh, yeah, it's time to go to sleep. I'll turn off the lights. I'll be asleep. No, there's momentum to the activity in your brain. You can't put the brakes on it like you turn off a light switch. And so you need to allow yourself, this is a health matter. This is really important. You need to allow yourself to decompress. That's not compatible with listening to and watching all the headlines about world events and the snowstorm coming, if it is in your area at any time of day or night or season. And then think, oh yeah, all that will recede the minute that I decide to close my eyes. No, you need to give yourself some peace before trying to get that restorative sleep.
Yeah, so meditation or praying, anything that relaxes you, even a warm bath. But also, one other thing that the experts recommend is cooling your room. And your room, I've heard different ranges. Most of the ranges I've heard are between 65 and 67, but I've heard as low as 64. So perhaps it varies based on the person. But at least to 67 degrees should help your core body temperature drop enough to help you get to sleep.
I love that. And then revisiting some of the natural supplements or naturally occurring ingredients that can help you with your sleep. The reason that you'll find them in For Great Sleep, which you can get at forvitahealth.com. There are a number, and combining them, we find, is most effective. L-theanine is an amino acid that promotes calm. Magnesium will help you relax. They're all different. There's magnesium threonate, there's magnesium glycinate. GABA, another amino acid or neurotransmitter, will help you with nervous system settling. And then things like chamomile and hops are used for calming as well, and L-tryptophan, which will support your natural melatonin pathway in your brain. These things combined can help you move your brain into that cleansing, restorative mode, because you need to be getting deep sleep in order for that to happen.
Yeah. Now, one thing that we should bring up though, people are like, maybe I should have several beers before I go to sleep because it has hops in it. Well, perhaps the hops are going to calm you a little bit, but the alcohol in the beer can actually keep you awake. So you're fighting the sleep wake cycle if you're drinking alcohol before you go to bed.
I believe that's absolutely true. And there are much better alternatives like the ingredients in For Great Sleep. There's some interesting things about sleep and humans that are worth considering. For instance, it's hard to get people to value their sleep and respond to it enough if they underestimate how much sleep they're actually losing. So people tend to actually say that they're getting more sleep than they are. And it's not a little. People underestimate the amount of sleep they're getting by as much as 50%. So you'll say, somebody asks you, how did you sleep last night? Fine. And if you were to actually have the facts, you'd say, no, you didn't. You're underestimating it by half. Blue light, we talked about that, can delay the onset of sleep by as much as an hour. That's amazing because we all have our phones and we take up to bed, which is interesting because people, when they marketed phones, they weren't quite sure that would be the case. I know there were some experts who said, no, people will end up going to bed with these phones and we're hooked on them. We're addicted. And that can prevent your melatonin from being released for as much as an hour. And then also, your brain tends to crave sugar 30% more the following morning if you haven't slept well. Now, we don't really know why that is, maybe for quick energy, but that certainly, if you have sleep apnea or you have other things that are impairing your sleep, or you're just looking at the internet and then trying to go to bed, you could literally find yourself saying, I got to have a Pop-Tart when you wake up in the morning because you don't feel right. Well, why? Because you need that quick, rapid energy from sugar, which is bad for you, by the way. And you don't want to get into that.
And it kind of makes me think a little bit about nutrition because think about getting in the morning. Why do people love donuts in the morning? Sugary cereals. Perhaps they're not getting enough sleep, right? Now, the other interesting thing, though, and of course, it's a hypothesis. I don't have any data behind this, but your brain uses a lot of energy during the night. We think of our brains as resting during the night, but actually, when you talked about the cerebral spinal fluid, you think about all that cleaning that's going on there. So there's a lot of energy being used overnight. And as a matter of fact, and I'm sure you know this as a neuroscientist and a psychiatrist, when you're in that REM sleep where you think your brain may be resting, it's actually very active. We're actually paralyzed during that time, essentially paralyzed. And
Not
that's
to
when we have
worry, but yes.
no, I mean, be woken up from it, but yeah, it's not like it's a full body that you're paralyzed for life, but you're essentially paralyzed as you go into those really deep, vivid dreams that are the ones that kind of get etched in your brain.
Correct. So listen, here's a quick review. If I get some of these points across, I'll feel good because I think it's so important. The big headline is, who knew? But during sleep, your brain tissue contracts in certain ways, in certain places. It allows for the fluid to rush into your brain and out, the cerebrospinal fluid in a circuit. And it essentially is getting rid of debris from your brain. It's important. It's so important, by the way, just to review again, that if you don't do it, if you don't get enough deep sleep, it's going to happen to you during the day. You just won't know it. Your brain will steal what it needs in tiny doses. It won't be enough, but during those times, you won't be able to pay attention in the way you need to. And your brain will register brain fog, essentially. So really, I think people should go to 4vitahealth.com, get 4 great sleep if you need it. And always visit feelamazingdaily.com because we have so much information there about many different health topics, including optimizing your sleep and other tidbits about how to live a better life. And we always close by saying and meaning, we hope you feel amazing every single day.
Program is for educational and informational purposes only and is not medical advice. Consult a healthcare provider before adding supplements to your diet. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. The products discussed are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.